She was a simple woman who loved the little joys in life. Her days were usually quiet, filled with the comforting rhythm of everyday routines. She lived in a cozy neighborhood where everyone seemed to know each other, but she preferred her own company most of the time. Her home wasn't big or fancy, but it was her sanctuary, a place where she could breathe, relax, and escape from the busyness of the world. The one thing she treasured most was her backyard. It was a small piece of paradise, filled with colorful flowers, lush green grass, and a few trees that swayed gently in the wind. It was her personal retreat, a place where she could sit with a cup of tea in the morning, watch the birds flit from branch to branch, and enjoy the simple peace of life. Every plant in her garden had a story. She had planted them herself, one by one, nurturing them from tiny seeds into flourishing blooms. She loved the quiet satisfaction of watching something grow under her care. It wasn't just a garden, it was a reflection of her patience, her care, and her love for small, beautiful things. Sitting there, surrounded by the fragrance of flowers and the sound of rustling leaves, she felt a deep sense of contentment. This backyard wasn't just a place, it was a feeling, a safe space where she could recharge and be herself without anyone intruding on her thoughts or her peace. But even in a peaceful neighborhood, there's always that one person who doesn't understand the meaning of boundaries. For her, that person was Karen. Karen was a woman from the same street who seemed to have a natural talent for creating trouble where there was none. She had a way of appearing at the most inconvenient times, with an attitude that suggested she had the right to do whatever she wanted. At first, it was small things. Karen would lean over the fence and comment on her plans, sometimes offering advice that wasn't needed. The simple woman, being polite and patient, would smile and nod, thinking Karen was just curious. She never imagined that these small intrusions were just the beginning of something far more irritating. Over time, Karen's visits became more frequent. She would wander into the backyard without asking, sometimes carrying her own coffee or snacks as if it were a casual invitation to barge in. She would step over flower beds, crush a few petals underfoot, and give unsolicited comments about how things should be done. The woman tried to laugh it off, to brush it away as harmless nosiness, but inside she felt her patience fraying little by little. Every intrusion chipped away at the sense of peace she had worked so hard to create. The backyard that once felt like a private haven now started to feel like a stage for Karen's constant presence. Despite this, the simple woman remained composed. She valued kindness and believed in maintaining good relationships with neighbors whenever possible. She didn't want to start a conflict over something so trivial, or so she thought at first. She tried subtle hints, leaving the gate closed, politely asking Karen to respect her space, and hoping that these gentle signals would be enough. But Karen seemed oblivious, or perhaps she simply didn't care. The more she ignored these hints, the more bold her behavior became. It was as if Karen thrived on crossing boundaries and pushing limits, never stopping to consider the effect her actions had on the woman's peace of mind. This constant intrusion began to affect more than just the garden, it touched the very core of the simple woman's daily life. She started feeling uneasy even when she simply wanted to relax. Sitting in her favorite chair, which had once been her spot of comfort, now came with a twinge of anxiety, wondering if Karen would suddenly appear, interrupting the quiet she cherished so much. She felt a mixture of frustration and sadness, realizing that her sanctuary was no longer fully hers. The woman was patient and kind-hearted, but even patience has its limits, and this realization slowly planted the seed of determination in her heart. Yet, amidst the annoyance and growing frustration, the woman didn't lose her sense of self. She still tended to her garden with care, still enjoyed the simple pleasures of life, and still found moments of peace amid the chaos that Karen created. She held on to the belief that everyone deserves respect and personal space, and she clung to the hope that Karen would eventually understand this too. But deep down, she knew that something had to change. Her backyard wasn't just a patch of land, it was her refuge, her safe place. And she wasn't going to let anyone, no matter how nosy or bold, take that away from her. This was the calm before the storm, the quiet moment that marked the beginning of a story about courage, self-respect, and standing up for oneself. It was the start of a journey in which a simple woman, tired of enduring disrespect, would find a way to protect her sanctuary, and in doing so, teach Karen a lesson she would never forget. It all started on an ordinary Saturday morning. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a warm golden glow over the neighborhood, and the simple woman was sipping her steaming cup of tea in her backyard. The air smelled faintly of fresh soil and blooming flowers, and the birds were chirping as if celebrating the new day. It was the perfect moment of peace, one of those rare mornings when everything seemed exactly as it should be. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment, letting herself drift into the quiet serenity she had worked so hard to create in her garden. That's when she heard it, a voice, sharp and intrusive, cutting through the calm like a sudden gust of wind. "Oh wow! Look at this little flower here. Are you sure you planted it in the right spot?" Her eyes flew open. At the edge of her backyard, leaning over the fence with a smug grin, was Karen. The woman froze for a moment, unsure whether to be angry or just sigh at the audacity. Karen had that uncanny ability to appear out of nowhere, always when it was least convenient, as if she had a radar for moments of peace. The simple woman forced a polite smile, hoping that a gentle greeting might defuse the situation. "Good morning, Karen. Yes, I planted it there. Thank you for noticing." But Karen didn't notice in the way she claimed. She stepped closer, peering at the flower as if she were inspecting a masterpiece. Are you sure that's going to grow properly? I think it would look better if you moved it over here," she said, pointing to another part of the yard that was perfectly fine the way it was. The simple woman felt a flicker of irritation. She had heard this kind of comment before, but for some reason, this morning, it felt sharper. She took a slow breath, reminding herself to stay calm. "I appreciate the advice, Karen, but I'm happy with it here," she said, trying to sound kind but firm. Karen ignored her entirely. She leaned even closer, crouching down to examine the soil around the flower, and muttered, "I don't know. I think it's a mistake. You should really reconsider." That was the moment the simple woman realized something important. Karen didn't just comment out of curiosity. She was deliberately crossing a line, treating the backyard as if it were public property. The polite patience the woman had extended in the past was starting to feel foolish, as if her kindness was being taken for granted. Instead of snapping, the woman decided to try a new approach. She walked slowly toward Karen, keeping her tone calm but firm. "Karen, I know you mean well, but this is my backyard. I'd really appreciate it if you didn't step inside without asking." Karen laughed, a sound that grated on the nerves. "Oh, don't be so serious. I'm just trying to help. You're being too uptight." The simple woman clenched her fists for a moment, resisting the urge to raise her voice. This was exactly the type of attitude that made dealing with Karen so difficult. People like Karen didn't understand subtle hints, politeness, or boundaries, they only respected action and consequence. But she didn't let anger take over. Instead, she focused on her garden, gently brushing a leaf aside as she spoke. "I know you think you're helping, but this is my personal space. Please respect it." Karen tilted her head, pretending to consider this advice, but it was clear she had no intention of actually listening. After a few moments, she finally straightened up and sauntered away, tossing a casual wave over her shoulder. Fine, whatever," she said, with a smirk that made the woman's stomach twist. As Karen disappeared down the street, the simple woman let out a long sigh, sinking back into her chair. The flowers seemed to smell a little sweeter again, but the irritation lingered. This first real intrusion, though seemingly minor, planted a seed of determination in her mind. She realized that if she wanted to enjoy her backyard in peace, she would have to do more than ask politely. For the rest of the day, she tended to her plants with careful attention, but her mind kept replaying the encounter. She thought about Karen's smug expression, the way she disregarded every polite word, and how easy it seemed for some people to ignore boundaries. It wasn't just about a flower or a garden, it was about respect, personal space, and standing up for oneself. By evening, The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the woman sat in her backyard once more. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the first stars began to twinkle. She realized something important: she could no longer rely on hope or patience alone. Karen's intrusion had been the first test, and the simple woman knew more challenges were coming. But she also felt a quiet resolve growing inside her. She wasn't going to let anyone take away her sanctuary. This backyard had been her haven for years, a place of peace and comfort, and she was determined to protect it. The first incident had ended, but the story was only beginning, and she silently promised herself that next time, she would be ready. After the first encounter, the simple woman thought the problem might settle down. She had politely set boundaries, asked for respect, and hoped Karen would finally understand that the backyard was private. But she quickly realized she had underestimated Karen. What had started as a minor annoyance soon escalated into a pattern of intrusion that tested her patience and courage in ways she never imagined. It began subtly at first. Karen would appear more often, leaning over the fence to make comments about the garden. Sometimes she arrived in the middle of the morning, other times late in the evening, seemingly determined to show that her presence was unwelcome yet unavoidable. The simple woman noticed that Karen didn't just comment on the plants anymore. She had started walking along the edges of the yard, examining the soil, poking at the flowers, and offering opinions that were neither requested nor useful. It was no longer just curiosity, it was an invasion of her personal space. At first, the woman tried to ignore it. She continued her routines, watering the plants, trimming the hedges, and planting new flowers, hoping Karen's interest would eventually wane. But it didn't. Karen's intrusions became more frequent, almost daily, and her tone shifted from casual advice to condescending lectures. "You should really plant this elsewhere, it'll grow better there," she would say, tapping at a flower with an annoying confidence. Or she'd make jokes about the simple woman's gardening skills in front of neighbors, adding a public layer of humiliation to her private annoyance. One afternoon, as the woman was planting a new row of tulips, Karen appeared again. This time, she stepped directly onto the flower bed, crushing several bulbs underfoot. The simple woman froze, staring in disbelief. "Karen! Please don't step there. Those are new," she exclaimed, trying to keep her voice calm. Karen waved dismissively. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a few flowers. They'll grow back." The word stung, but it wasn't just the flowers that hurt, it was the complete disregard for respect. The simple woman realized that kindness alone would no longer be enough. She couldn't rely on politeness or subtle hints anymore. Karen seemed to thrive on pushing boundaries, testing limits, and provoking reactions. It was as if every intrusion was a challenge, daring the woman to respond. With each visit, the woman felt her frustration growing. She noticed herself tensing whenever she saw Karen walking down the street, anticipating the inevitable intrusion. Even the small joys of the backyard, the soft rustle of leaves, the delicate fragrance of flowers, the peaceful chirping of birds, were tainted by the worry that Karen would appear at any moment. Her sanctuary, once a place of complete calm, now carried a constant undercurrent of tension. But alongside the frustration, a seed of determination began to grow. The simple woman started observing Karen's behavior more closely. She noticed patterns, the times of day she appeared, the excuses she used, and the way she seemed to enjoy asserting control over the space that wasn't hers. It became clear that if she wanted to reclaim her backyard and her peace, she couldn't rely on chance. She needed a plan, a way to assert her boundaries firmly and ensure Karen understood that intrusion was unacceptable. Despite the escalating tension, the woman continued her daily life, tending to her garden with even more care and focus. Each flower she planted, each leaf she trimmed, was a small act of resistance, a statement that her space was hers to nurture and protect. Yet, every time Karen intruded, it felt like a battle of wills, and the woman realized she had entered a subtle but relentless struggle. The neighborhood began to notice too. Neighbors who once admired the woman's beautiful backyard began witnessing Karen's audacity. Some offered sympathy, others whispered their opinions, but the simple woman remained focused on one thing: protecting her space without losing her composure. She understood that confrontation was inevitable, but she also knew it had to be handled thoughtfully. Acting in anger would only escalate the situation further. By the end of the week, it was clear that the pattern had solidified. Karen was no longer just a nuisance, she was a constant presence, a force testing the simple woman's patience and resolve. The escalation had reached a point where ignoring the problem was no longer an option. Something had to change, and the woman began to plan carefully, knowing that the next encounter could be the turning point in reclaiming her backyard and restoring her peace of mind. It was in this moment of tension, observation, and quiet determination that the real story began to unfold, a story of courage, cleverness, and the will to protect what was rightfully hers. Karen had crossed the line too many times, and the simple woman was ready to take control of her backyard, and teach Karen a lesson she would never forget. By the time the fourth week rolled around, the simple woman could no longer ignore the constant intrusions. What had begun as small, annoying visits from Karen had grown into a daily ordeal that drained her energy and tested her patience. Each morning, she would step into her backyard, hoping for a quiet start, only to find herself bracing for Karen's unexpected arrival. The tension had become almost palpable, lingering like a shadow over the flowers she had nurtured and the peaceful retreat she had built. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. The sun was shining brightly, and the woman had decided to spend the day repotting some new plants she had bought from the local nursery. She hummed softly as she worked, feeling the soil between her fingers and enjoying the familiar scent of fresh earth. For a moment, it seemed like the backyard had finally returned to the calm she had been craving. But that calm was short-lived. From the corner of her eye, she saw Karen appear once again. This time, Karen didn't bother with polite greetings or casual remarks. She strolled confidently through the gate as if she owned the place, her eyes scanning every corner, looking for something to criticize or meddle with. The simple woman's heart sank, a wave of frustration and anger rising inside her. She had asked, hinted, and requested, yet nothing had stopped Karen from crossing every boundary she had set. Karen crouched down near a flower bed, picking up a small plant and holding it like it belonged to her. "Oh, this one's looking a little sad. Maybe it needs more sunlight, or maybe it's just not meant to grow here," she said with a smirk. The woman's hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from a mix of irritation and determination. She had been patient for weeks, maintaining her composure and hoping that politeness would be enough. But now, she realized, patience had limits. Her sanctuary, the place that had once been her refuge, was being trampled upon, and she could no longer allow it to happen. "Karen," she said firmly, stepping forward, "I've asked you before, this is my backyard. You cannot just come in here and touch my plants or tell me how to take care of them. I need you to leave." Karen laughed, brushing off the warning. "Oh, come on. You're too sensitive. I'm just trying to help." It was at that moment that something inside the woman shifted. She felt a surge of empowerment, a clarity that told her this wasn't just about flowers or soil, it was about respect, personal boundaries, and self-worth. She realized that if she didn't act now, Karen would continue to treat her space as her own, eroding not just the peace of her backyard but her sense of control over her own life. The simple woman took a deep breath and decided that it was time for decisive action. She didn't want to retaliate angrily or escalate into shouting, she wanted to reclaim her backyard in a way that would make Karen understand the seriousness of her behavior. This wasn't just about teaching a lesson, it was about protecting her space, asserting her boundaries, and regaining the sense of security that had been slowly stripped away. Karen, unaware of the resolve she had sparked, continued to poke around the flower beds, offering unsolicited advice and making offhand comments. But the woman remained calm, her mind focused on the next steps. She began to imagine a plan, carefully considering how to make Karen realize that intrusion was unacceptable without creating unnecessary drama. It had to be clever, effective, and satisfying, not just for revenge, but for justice and peace of mind. The breaking point had been reached. Weeks of tolerance, politeness, and subtle hints had failed. Karen had tested the simple woman's patience one too many times. The calm, quiet woman who once smiled politely and stepped aside now stood firm, ready to take control of her backyard and her life. The small, serene garden that had been invaded so many times was about to become the stage for a lesson that Karen would never forget. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the backyard, the simple woman felt a mixture of determination and anticipation. She knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. Karen had pushed boundaries for the last time, and soon, she would learn that the peaceful backyard of a simple woman was not to be trifled with. This was the turning point, the moment when patience ended, and action began, a moment that would change everything. After the breaking point, the simple woman knew she couldn't rely on patience or polite words anymore. Karen had made it clear that she didn't respect boundaries, and any direct confrontation might only provoke more disrespect. So, instead of acting impulsively, the woman decided to think strategically. She needed a plan, a clever, effective way to reclaim her backyard and teach Karen a lesson she would never forget. For days, she observed Karen from a distance, paying close attention to her habits, moods, and the way she interacted with the neighborhood. Karen had certain patterns. She loved attention, she thrived on being in control, and she often acted impulsively when she thought she could manipulate a situation. The woman realized that the key wasn't confrontation, it was psychology. She could use Karen's own traits against her in a way that would make the point crystal clear. She began by making subtle adjustments to her backyard. Small changes, almost unnoticeable, were placed carefully in areas where Karen usually wandered. Some flower beds were arranged to look perfectly ordinary but were slightly off in a way that Karen's sharp eyes couldn't resist commenting on. She added a few unexpected elements, a hidden hose here, a decorative scarecrow there, so that Karen's natural curiosity and tendency to interfere would draw her directly into the setup. Meanwhile, the woman rehearsed in her mind how she would respond. Calm, composed, and confident were the words she repeated to herself like a mantra. She would not raise her voice, she would not act out of anger, and she would not give Karen the satisfaction of seeing her flustered. Every move had to be deliberate, every reaction intentional. She wanted Karen to leave understanding, without question, that her behavior was unacceptable. The woman also considered timing. Karen usually appeared during late mornings or early afternoons, often when the woman was in the middle of tending to her garden. So, she prepared herself for those times, keeping a clear path and positioning herself where Karen would notice her presence immediately. She didn't want a confrontation in haste, she wanted control over the situation from start to finish. What made the plan truly effective, however, was the element of surprise. Karen had grown comfortable with the backyard, believing she could enter and meddle without consequences. The woman used this to her advantage, setting up a scenario that would make Karen overstep in a way she couldn't ignore. Everything was designed so that Karen's actions would reveal her own disrespect, leaving her embarrassed and regretful without the woman ever raising a hand. At night, the woman reviewed her plan mentally, imagining each step as if it were a scene in a movie. She pictured Karen stepping into the yard, confidently asserting herself, and then realizing, too late, that she had walked straight into a situation she couldn't manipulate. The idea wasn't malicious, it was justice served cleverly. She wanted Karen to understand the impact of her actions, not just for a moment, but in a way that would stick with her. The plan wasn't just about Karen. It was about the woman reclaiming her sense of control, her peace, and her dignity. She had endured weeks of intrusion, irritation, and tension, but now she had a strategy. The backyard would once again be her sanctuary, and Karen would learn that personal space is not optional, it's essential. By the time the next morning arrived, the woman was ready. Every plant was in place, every obstacle subtly arranged, and her own mindset sharp and steady. She knew Karen would come, and she was prepared to turn what had been a frustrating routine into a decisive moment of triumph. This was more than a plan, it was the culmination of patience, observation, and clever thinking. As the sun rose over her backyard, casting a warm, golden light on the garden, the woman felt a thrill of anticipation. The stage was set, and she was confident that the simple, quiet life she cherished would no longer be disrupted. Karen's intrusion would finally meet the consequences it deserved, and the backyard, her personal haven, would be restored. It was the calm before the storm, the perfect moment before the clever plan unfolded, and the woman felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that soon, her patience and strategy would pay off in full. The morning was crisp, with a gentle breeze rustling through the trees, and the simple woman felt a quiet excitement in her chest. Today was the day her plan would unfold. Weeks of patience, observation, and subtle preparation had led to this moment, and she knew she had every advantage. Her backyard looked ordinary, peaceful, even, but every detail had been arranged to draw Karen in and make her overstep in ways that would finally teach her a lesson. Sure enough, by mid-morning, Karen appeared. She strolled down the sidewalk with her usual confident air, waving at a few neighbors as if nothing was unusual, completely unaware that she was walking straight into a trap. As she reached the woman's gate, she opened it without knocking, just as she always did, expecting the same casual tolerance she had exploited for weeks. The woman was already positioned near the flower beds, standing tall and composed, her hands loosely folded in front of her. She didn't need to shout or scold, her calm presence alone communicated authority. Karen paused for a brief second, registering that something was different, but her curiosity and sense of entitlement overpowered any hesitation. Karen wandered deeper into the backyard, moving toward a row of newly planted flowers that the woman had intentionally planted slightly off-center. These were the flowers Karen was most likely to notice and criticize. Sure enough, Karen knelt down, leaning close to inspect the arrangement. This doesn't look right at all. Are you sure you planted these properly? She said, her voice full of that familiar condescension. The woman smiled softly, keeping her tone calm and deliberate. Yes, I planted them exactly as I wanted. I'd appreciate it if you didn't touch them. Karen, as expected, ignored the polite request. She reached out to adjust a flower, only to feel her hand catch on the cleverly placed garden tape the woman had hidden among the stems. It was designed to create a minor, harmless shock of surprise, enough to make Karen step back and stumble slightly. Her foot landed in a small patch of loose soil that had been carefully prepared to tip and reveal a hidden, harmless marker, a small flag labeled, in playful yet pointed letters, "Private property, respect boundaries." Karen froze, her face flushing in a mix of confusion and embarrassment. The woman remained calm, standing a few steps away, letting the setup speak for itself. She didn't need to yell or explain, Karen's reaction was already delivering the lesson. For once, she was the one caught off guard, her usual confidence replaced by discomfort. Karen stumbled backward, looking around nervously, realizing that every step she had taken in the backyard had been noticed and subtly managed by the woman. The flowers she had aimed to criticize were untouched, the paths she had walked were carefully monitored, and the small surprises she had triggered made it clear that this space was not hers to command. The simple woman approached slowly, her voice steady and calm. "Karen, I've asked you many times to respect my space. This backyard is private, and I will not allow anyone to enter without permission. It's as simple as that." Karen opened her mouth, as if to protest, but the look in the woman's eyes, a mix of patience, confidence, and quiet authority, stopped her in her tracks. She realized that her usual tactics, her smug confidence, and her disregard for boundaries were no longer effective. For the first time, Karen felt vulnerable and out of control, a sensation she had never experienced when dealing with others in the neighborhood. The woman's plan had worked perfectly. It wasn't about humiliation or anger, it was about creating a moment of understanding, a clear signal that intrusion comes with consequences. Karen had learned something that polite words, hints, and gentle warnings had failed to convey. By the time Karen backed out of the backyard, muttering excuses and promises to behave, the woman stood tall, her garden calm and untouched. Her sanctuary was restored, and she felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The flowers seemed brighter, the air fresher, and the backyard finally felt like her own again. She hadn't needed to shout, argue, or escalate into conflict, clever planning, observation, and a calm approach had done the work for her. As the day went on, the neighborhood buzzed quietly with whispers of what had happened, but the woman remained serene. She had proven something important, not just to Karen, but to herself. She could protect her space, maintain her dignity, and handle difficult situations with intelligence and grace. The execution of her plan was not only a triumph over a persistent intruder but a testament to the power of patience, strategy, and self-respect. The air in the neighborhood felt different after that day. It was as if a subtle shift had taken place, one that only those who had witnessed the events, or heard about them, could sense. The simple woman moved through her backyard with a calmness she hadn't felt in weeks. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, the soil was perfectly arranged, and the quiet hum of birds and bees filled the space with life. For the first time in a long while, the backyard felt truly hers again, a haven of peace, order, and quiet satisfaction. Karen, meanwhile, was noticeably subdued. The audacious confidence she once carried had softened into a cautious awareness. Her usual smirks and unsolicited comments had vanished. She walked past the simple woman's yard without leaning over the fence or offering advice. The look in her eyes betrayed a mix of embarrassment, surprise, and newfound respect. For the first time, she realized that boundaries were not suggestions, they were rules, ones that could not be ignored without consequence. The simple woman noticed the change immediately. It wasn't a moment of triumph born from anger or revenge, it was a quiet victory of patience, observation, and clever action. She had reclaimed her sanctuary not through conflict, but through strategy and composure. Her actions had sent a clear message: her space was hers to protect, and anyone who failed to respect it would face the consequences of their own choices. Neighbors began to take note as well. Some had witnessed Karen stumble into the subtle traps the woman had arranged, while others had heard whispers of what had happened. Soon, the story spread, not as gossip, but as an example of how intelligence, calmness, and resolve could solve a problem that brute force or confrontation might have only escalated. People admired the simple woman, not just for her beautiful garden, but for the way she had handled a difficult situation with dignity and cleverness. Over the following days, the backyard returned to its peaceful routine. The simple woman spent her mornings tending to her flowers, pruning, planting, and watering, without the tension of anticipating unexpected interruptions. The garden had regained its tranquility, and so had she. Each small act, like gently rearranging a row of tulips or watching a butterfly land on a flower, felt more meaningful now, as though the serenity she had fought to protect was sweeter for having been defended. Karen, on the other hand, seemed changed. The woman noticed her from a distance on a few occasions, lingering near the edge of her yard but no longer stepping inside or offering unsolicited advice. Her posture had shifted slightly, her gestures more hesitant, as if she were finally aware that respect had boundaries and that crossing them came at a cost. While the woman did not seek revenge or public acknowledgement, she found a quiet satisfaction in knowing that Karen had learned a lesson the hard way, without anyone needing to yell, argue, or escalate tensions. This resolution brought more than just calm to the backyard, it brought confidence to the simple woman. She realized that standing up for oneself didn't require aggression, it required strategy, patience, and clarity of purpose. She had discovered that one could defend personal space while maintaining grace, proving that intelligence and composure are often more powerful than confrontation. The neighborhood slowly returned to its usual rhythm, and the simple woman's garden once again became a place of beauty, peace, and joy. Friends and neighbors who stopped by were drawn not just to the flowers but to the serenity and order of the space. There was a sense of quiet admiration in their eyes, as if they could feel the story of resilience and cleverness woven into every bloom and every neatly trimmed hedge. As the sun set each evening, casting golden light over her backyard, the simple woman would take a moment to breathe deeply and appreciate the calm she had fought to reclaim. The confrontation with Karen, the careful planning, and the clever execution had all led to this perfect resolution. She had defended her space, regained her peace, and restored her sanctuary without losing her composure or integrity. And in that moment, she understood something vital: standing up for oneself doesn't have to be loud or aggressive. Sometimes, the most powerful victories are quiet, clever, and deliberate, like the soft sway of flowers in a backyard that finally belongs to its rightful owner. The events with Karen had long passed, yet the lessons lingered vividly in the simple woman's mind. Her backyard was once again a haven, a place of peace, beauty, and personal freedom, but the experience had taught her much more than just how to protect her garden. It had revealed truths about courage, patience, and the quiet power of intelligence over confrontation. For weeks, she had endured Karen's intrusions, small at first, seemingly harmless, but gradually escalating into repeated disregard for boundaries. Many would have reacted in anger, shouting or confronting the intruder aggressively, but the simple woman chose a different path. She observed, reflected, and planned. Every step she took was deliberate, aimed not at vengeance but at restoring respect for her space and dignity for herself. The calm she maintained during Karen's provocations proved that strength does not always roar, it can be quiet, clever, and effective. Through this experience, the woman realized the importance of boundaries. Boundaries are not just lines drawn in the dirt or rules of etiquette, they are a declaration of self-respect and personal integrity. Karen's repeated intrusions had been a test, not just of patience, but of the woman's ability to assert herself wisely. The moment she recognized that subtle requests and hints were insufficient, she acted with intention, and that was the turning point. She understood that protecting one's space is not selfish, it is essential for mental well-being, confidence, and inner peace. The clever plan she had devised taught her another critical lesson: observation and strategy are often more powerful than confrontation. By studying Karen's behavior, understanding her weaknesses, and setting up a situation that allowed Karen to experience the consequences of her own actions, the woman reclaimed control without aggression. This approach demonstrated that patience combined with insight can produce results far more satisfying than impulsive anger ever could. The execution of her plan was a masterclass in quiet strength, showing that courage and cleverness often work hand in hand. Beyond the garden and the confrontation itself, the experience shaped her understanding of respect and influence. Karen had learned that entitlement has limits and that actions always carry consequences. More importantly, the woman had learned that she did not need to rely on others' approval to assert herself. Respect begins with self-respect, and once she embraced that truth, she could navigate any challenge with calm assurance. The lesson wasn't just about dealing with a difficult neighbor, it was about the universal principle that standing up for oneself thoughtfully and deliberately is a form of empowerment. Looking back, the simple woman realized that the conflict had strengthened her in ways she had not anticipated. She had discovered reserves of patience she didn't know she possessed, sharpened her problem-solving skills, and gained confidence in her ability to manage difficult situations without losing composure. She had turned frustration into action, annoyance into strategy, and boundary violations into an opportunity to demonstrate dignity and control. In a way, the challenge had transformed her backyard into more than a physical space, it had become a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and self-respect. As days passed, her life returned to its usual rhythm, but the empowerment lingered. Every morning she walked through her garden, tending to the flowers, feeling the soil, and hearing the rustle of leaves. Each simple task carried a sense of triumph, a reminder that she had taken control of her space, her peace, and her life. She understood that true strength often lies not in confrontation, but in preparation, patience, and thoughtful action. Her story became a quiet inspiration, not only for herself but for others who witnessed it or heard about it. It was proof that even ordinary people, those who consider themselves simple, patient, or gentle, can stand up to challenges with wisdom and effectiveness. You don't need aggression, loud arguments, or anger to defend what's yours. Sometimes, the most powerful lessons are delivered through cleverness, observation, and deliberate action. Ultimately, the simple woman's experience with Karen left her with a profound understanding: boundaries are sacred, patience is a strength, and clever action can turn frustration into empowerment. Life will always present challenges, people will overstep, and situations will test your resolve, but the way you respond defines not only the outcome but also who you are. She had turned a series of annoyances into an opportunity for personal growth, demonstrating that courage, intelligence, and self-respect are always worth cultivating. And in that quiet backyard, with the sun warming her shoulders and the flowers swaying in the breeze, she smiled, knowing that she had not only defended her garden but also protected the most important thing of all, her peace, dignity, and sense of self.